The following presentation was recorded at the 2025 Southeast Linuxfest in Charlotte, North Carolina. It is licensed under a Creative Commons license. For more information on the Southeast Linuxfest, visit www.southeastlinuxfest.org. Come join us next June.
All right. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. We'll start fairly soon. Given there's a very small number of people here, maybe we can keep it interactive. Just curious in the audience, what caught you about this topic? Because most of the topics here are fairly technical. This is probably one of the semi-business, semi-technical talk out here. So just curious, can somebody tell me what caught the attention, what you're looking to get out of this talk?
I'm more curious on the hiring side. I'm working on getting into tech.
Okay.
So I'm curious about the insights on what you might be looking for in our spot.
Got it. How about you? Okay. Okay. All right. You both? Okay. And you? Okay. All right. So good to know. So most of the questions are on hiring, a little bit on the startup structure and all that. So let me cover that as much as possible. So before going deep into this, I want to give a little bit of background about myself. I think one line way of summarizing my career is from open source contributor to a CEO of a startup. That's my journey. I actually owe my career to Linux. Um, I I've got a passion for Linux very, very early in my computing career, and that passion led me to a company called VMware. Many of you may know that company. I'll give a little more details on what I did for VMware. Spent a decade there, learned a lot, and that led me to join another startup, which was actually funded and founded by early employees of VMware. In fact, Diane Green, who was the founder of VMware, also funded that company called Cloud Physics. I was there for 4 years, and then I left that and started my own startup. So I have a very diverse background. Early 1994 and 1996, I was doing a lot of programming in the DOS ecosystem with FoxPro, Pascal. In fact, I built an application for my high school back in India, and they were actually using that software for like 15 years since I built it, which is fascinating. I went and revisited my high school 15 years later, and they're still using it, which I thought was fascinating. All the languages I picked was completely out of my self-interest. I formally studied chemical engineering, so I don't have any background in computer science. Computers was completely self-taught by destructing machines, breaking things, and fixing things. And so that was a very, very fun journey. 1996 to 2000, I was exposed to Linux. There used to be a magazine in India. It's called PC Quest. I don't know if it existed in the US, but there was a magazine in India called PC Quest. So every month, the magazine used to come with a CD-ROM drive. In the CD-ROM drive, they usually have freewares and demowares to try it out. Mostly it was video games for DOS and Windows environment. One particular edition, they had Slackware Linux shipped in the CD-ROM. And I had no exposure to Linux prior to that. I was only using DOS. And I was a little disappointed because not many games were there in that disk. So like, why did I buy this magazine? There's no games on this. What is this Slackware? And I couldn't boot the system in Slackware. I didn't know how to boot the system in Slackware. So that really piqued my interest. And then started reading about it. I mean, this is the era of dial-up internet, so internet was not the fastest thing out there. I used to go to bulletin boards and read things there. Somehow managed to install Lilo, a Linux loader back then. I got Slackware installed, And that really got my curiosity into Linux. In fact, I had nobody even taught me any Linux command. The only commands I would know were DOS commands. So when I was first dropped into the Linux prompt, all I was able to do was CD, and that's it. I didn't know anything else. And I happened to had a Unix book at home, so I was reading that book and I was understanding some commands. So completely self-taught. Linux was completely self-taught. Literally would go into folder by folder in every Linux folder, figuring out what files are there, what this files actually means. So that way of hardcore learning really gets you a deep understanding of an operating system structure from the file system perspective and all that. So I learned a lot in the process. Sorry, there's a question there? Well, there was not much internet back then. I mean, this was a dial-up modem, and also it was a time when if you're using a dial-up modem, you can't use your phone line. So somebody wants to make a phone call, I have to hang up and all that stuff. So one command I learned was man. So then I would do man everything, right? Man ls, man, and I read very detailed documentation. Probably would have read all the manuals of all the Linux commands. So within no time, I gained really good expertise into Linux, completely taught. And then I got into C programming, kernel programming, network programming, all of that fun stuff. Then in 2000, I graduated from my school. I completed chemical engineering for my final thesis. I was building a software program for reactor design in C and FoxPro. It's actually I use both C and FoxPro, which is kind of interesting mix. Um, then I was very clear that I want to do a career in Linux. And at the time, Caldera Open Linux, I don't know how many of them in the audience knows Caldera Open Linux. It's a very interesting Linux distribution back then. They were setting up a shop in India for some training program. So I applied for that. I became a certified Linux trainer. I think LPI, Linux Professional Institute, was offering some certification back then, so on and so forth. So I was getting into that, and then I joined my very first company. I took peanut salary for the very first company because Linux demand for jobs in 2000 was non-existent in India. Absolutely non-existent. I would actually literally look for openings in the newspaper, and there's like one company had were looking for Unix administrators. So I applied for that, got in the job. I think my first salary was uh, 10,000 Indian rupees back then. This is 2000. 10,000 Indian rupees is equivalent to divided by 70. How much is that? Well, 150 bucks. That's my monthly salary. My very first job. I took the job because I was really passionate about having a career in Linux. And my dad used to say back then that your first job is your learning opportunity. So don't think about salary, just go find a job that allows you to learn a ton. So that's what I did. And ended up being a great choice because first 2 years the job literally we didn't have any work to do. So for me it was a lab. We had an AS400. We had a network of computer machines. We were installing Caldera Open Linux, all of them. We're doing all network experimentation. It was my complete playground. Learned a lot in the process. Picked up PHP programming, so I did some PHP programming in that side. Then in 2002, VMware back then was a very small startup. I think it had like 80 people in the company. Workstation 1.0, which is VMware's first product, was released. They somehow reached out to me in India. They had no presence in India. They reached out to me because they're looking for people with Linux expertise. And there are very few people in Linux expertise back in India at the time. And they said, we want to hire you. And I went through an interview process. And what they wanted me to hire me was for customer support. And I wasn't sure I wanted to have a career in customer support because I was very interested in programming. So was debating whether to join VMware or not. But I was exposed to VMware technology through Linux user groups back then. We used to do install fest, and we would bring VMware we would show VMware technology. In fact, I went and demoed to a lot of folks, local Linux user group, how to dual boot operating system using VMware. So, so that exposure also helped in my interview process because they were very stunned. That's a new startup in Silicon Valley, and I'm in India, and I already knew about VMware and operating systems and whatnot. So they ended up hiring me, and I was their first hire. At the time, there was a dilemma for me. I also got a job opportunity from Sun Microsystems. Sun was the hottest company back in 2002. And my friends, everyone told me, you're you're stupid to join VMware. What is this company VMware? If you're interested in operating system, you should go join Sun Microsystems. And Sun Microsystems was a programming job. VMware was a technical support job. But I was always enamored by virtualization and I was into operating systems. So the whole idea of booting an operating system within an operating system really fascinated me. So I ended up taking the VMware tech support job. And oh boy, what a decision what that was, because I think 2, 3 years later, Sun went out of business. And then VMware became a rocket ship. I moved to Palo Alto in 2004, and I was a global customer support escalations lead. So what that meant was some of the world's toughest problems in customer support using VMware, and these were mostly in the initial days with operating system developers, and they would run all kinds of crazy operating systems you can think of. Running into some technical issue, I have to solve it. If I don't solve it, it has to go to engineering. Basically, I was a final say between support and engineering. Um, and then VMware also very quickly became an enterprise product. And so also got a lot of enterprise customers. Circuit City, the company went out of business right now, or a big customer of VMware back then. Learned a ton in the process. So I spent 4 or 5 years in customer support, but it was very high-end customer support, very complex customer support. Then I went into VMware Performance Engineering Group, where I did a lot of really interesting work on virtualization performance. And there was lots of misunderstanding of how virtual machines perform in compared to physical machines, where the performance slowdown happens, so on and so forth. So did a lot of very cool stuff. Also did some para-virtualization work. I did some contribution to para-virtualization in the open source community as well. Uh, anyway, it's a fun ride. Probably one of the best jobs ever had. Is probably my 10-year tenure at VMware. Then cloud physics, picked up Scala programming, product management. I also picked up skills on product design, like UI UX design. I think it's a very fundamental skill to be a product manager. 2016 to 2018, I bootstrapped my current company, Support Logic, and I'll talk about the journey of Support Logic. I picked up Python, React.js, Sketch, UI, UX, all of that. So right now I'm a startup CEO. Unfortunately, it's been a while since I've touched code. I still miss it. So coming back to this conference is brought me back a lot of my early tech memories, because these days I'm mostly managing business. I'm not doing much of tech work. So that's kind of the background about me. And the reason this background is important for this particular talk is that product market fit for a startup is not just about what the product does for the market, but it's also about what is the founder's viewpoint on the product. There's a concept called founder market fit in addition to product market fit. And a founder has an experience, this 10, 15 years of my work experience, what I've observed in that experience, the raw truth that you experienced translates into a product. And this, to me, is fundamentally very important for any entrepreneur who wants to start something where you had some personal experience, where you had first-hand experience and you had a unique vantage point, unique viewpoint that no one else had. That gives you a pretty significant advantage when you're starting a company. That's what I had. This entire journey culminated into this company called Support Logic. Obviously, the name indicates it's something in the support space. So I'll talk about that. But it's very different than what many companies are there in the support space. And that's what I want to talk about today. All right. So the thesis for starting the company was this. Fundamentally, I look at the eras of computing into 4 different buckets. In the 1990s, right, the dominant technology was SQL databases. How do I know? Because I did Foxborough programming, right? I did DBase, Foxborough. I know that database was the dominant technology in the 1990s. And the core idea in that era was that, hey, there is a very efficient way to query large amounts of structured data using a concept called database with SQL programming. That was the idea, right? So companies like Siebel, DBase, Informix, Foxbase, Foxpro, they all existed in the 1990s era, right? But also this was the era where, if you remember, we sold software as a package solution, right? You ship software in a floppy disk or a CD-ROM drive, and you license it. And after that, it's completely the responsibility of the person who bought the software. The company who sold the software has no responsibility other than making the software, using the software, finding value from the software. It's all up to you. I mean, I remember going to Fry's Electronics in Silicon Valley, literally paying dollars to buy a CD-ROM drive with software in it, and then it's up to me. It's not the software vendor's responsibility, right? That was the era back in those days. Then internet boom happened, and the first innovation is, hey, let's put the SQL database in the cloud, and then let's put a website around it, and then let's call it a web application, right? This was the first version of Salesforce. Salesforce, now such a big company right now, their key innovation was, let's put database in the cloud and call it a day. That's their key innovation. So one thing that changed is the structured database, but the schema was flexible. Salesforce allowed you to create extended schema. They didn't define, they had a base schema, but then you can extend the schema the way you wanted. But also software development methodology changed. Licensing model went from a perpetual licensing model to kind of an ELA contract or a subscription contract. So that was in a very interesting phase, right? Then if you look at the last 2010 to 2020, then we moved into Web 2.0 era, right? So now we're going into the zone from highly structured to a highly structured with flexible schema to semi-structured databases. And this is where the MongoDBs of the world, all the semi-structured database became very popular. And that had its own unique advantages, parallel processing, large volume of data, big data became a big thing. So that was an interesting phase. So what's changed now is this is the first time in the industry we have technology to process unstructured data at scale. Today, we don't really need structured database. Well, we need structured databases for some things, but a lot of structure can be extracted from unstructured data. This was unheard of. I mean, when I started computing, I never thought you can query arbitrary flat files and get any context out of it, right? That technology exists today, which is fascinating. The other thing coincides with this, which is not there in the slide, but I like to think about it this way. We had the user interface of computing has changed over the years. In the era of mainframes, it was punch cards. That was user interface. In the era of Unix, command line interface is the user interface. In the era of PC, it's the mouse pointer and the keyboard is the user interface, right? In the era of mobile devices, touch became the user interface. In the intelligence era, the user interface is conversations. The conversations could be either you can type them or you can talk to a device. This is the first time in the industry that instead of humans needing to learn the language of machines, the machines are learning the language of humans. It's a fundamentally a paradigm shift. I think in the history of computing, this is a pivotal moment for us, right? And now we can do vibe coding. We don't need to know exact coding. You can say it in natural language, and the code can be generated. Now we can manipulate data with your language. You can do business intelligence, and so conversation is becoming the language of machines right now, which is fascinating. So I see this whole revolution of intelligence era as uh, more of a UX revolution, not necessarily just a technology revolution. Okay, why all of this connects to support logic and product market fit and what I do at support logic. So let me talk about it. Oh, I'm just building it out, the SQL era, SAS era, Web 2.0, and intelligence era. So This is the whiteboard I kind of scratched. I mean, the behind the scenes, what you're seeing is the real whiteboard brainstorming session I had with my first engineer in my company. This is back in 2016, during the time period. So, what happened? I left this company called Cloud Physics and I got my green card. So, I thought, okay, you know what, let me enjoy my freedom. And took a 6 months break, didn't do anything at home. I just enjoyed a cup of coffee every day, was reading newspapers, talking to a bunch of folks, and figuring out what I want to do when I want to start a company. So I was a lot of dating a lot of founders as well to figure out which founders would be a good fit and all that. Um, at that time, there was a thesis forming in my head about what company I want to build and why this might personally excite me and also why this would be a big thing for the industry. So the first thesis was I I always believed that experience makes a big difference, and experience is everything. So that was one of the core theses, and I'll explain why this is very, very important going forward. Second one is since I worked in support, customer support, I always thought customer support was not a revenue center, sorry, not a cost center, but a revenue center. Most companies treat customer support call centers as a cost center. Most companies think, hey, support is a shield between engineering and customers because engineers are busy building something. They don't have time to talk to customers. Put support in between, call it a day. And that's the role I did. Only difference is was an engineer would turn into a support engineer. Because I was an engineer turned into a support engineer, I saw two sides of the coin. What's the importance of support from an engineering perspective? What lessons you can learn from customer support that can put back into engineering? And what you can do in engineering to minimize customer support calls. I saw both sides. Um, and I always felt like there's so many hidden signals in customer support conversations. And if you harness those signals and you can process them, you can make complete big transformation in business. This always stayed with me, and this was my first hand experience doing VMware customer support, going into online discussion forums, so on and so forth. One more thing also I want to add there is that before my VMware journey, I used to assemble PCs. I used to help all my neighbors. So invariably, I became the IT support. Anytime something broke, I was the guy who was going and fixing issues. So I understood the context of support in many, many different dimensions. And I knew support is a revenue center. Third thing is, this is 2016, 2018 time period. AI was very immature at the time. Uh, I mean, AI is in the news in the last 2 years since ChatGPT. Back in 2016, I'm not kidding, I saw all the promise of ChatGPT back in 2016. And I was stunned. I was really stunned of what is possible. And so I knew this was not a fad. I knew this technology is going to be there and going to go mainstream. So I took a bet on AI. So when actually, I remember when I started the company and I was fundraising, a lot of investors were skeptical of AI. Right now, the situation is flipped. You put any AI on it, you get funded. Back then, they were very, very skeptical of AI. So, to the point, my company's first website, I had no reference to the word AI, even though we were an AI company. I had the domain supportlogic.ai, never used it. It was supportlogic.io. And website has nothing to AI. When I did pitch, there was no AI. I was only pitching the problem that I'm solving, not talking about the technology behind the scenes. But I knew AI is the right technology to solve it. So I took a bet on AI becoming really, really big. So the point here is that when you're starting a company or you're venturing into something, you have to have some thesis. And the thesis needs to stand the test of time. The thesis is not something that is fashionable for the next 5 years and goes out of fashion after that. Then your company won't survive because starting a company is a decade-long journey, if not more. So your ideas have to stand the test of time. So for me, these three was ideas. The thesis for my company would stand the test of time. I fundamentally believe as a business are going to focus more and more on experience, and experience is going to become everything. Support will be treated as a revenue center, and AI is going to be a foundational technology for every companies. Now, in hindsight, it looks fascinating. It looks like I got it right, but back in those days, this was a bold risk I took. So next thing is, I knew I wanted to do something in the support space, something with AI in it, what problems to solve, right? So this is a deck that Boston Consulting Group put together. This is probably a little hard to read here, but basically they talked about where AI could be used in customer support space in, I don't know, 20 different places or 30 different places. So when you're starting a company, you can't boil the ocean. You can't solve all the 20 different problems, right? So you need to pick like one narrow problem to solve. Which problem to solve, right? That's really, really tough to crack. So for me as a founder, especially with domain expertise in customer support and zero domain expertise in AI. I had no background in AI because I was doing systems programming. AI is like further on. The only closest exposure was Python programming, and that's it. I had no background in AI. So I was not worried about learning the AI technology. I know I can pick up any technology, but what problem to solve? That's the most crucial thing to focus on. So I came up with this thesis. The thesis is that every conversation has hidden signals. And if you don't harness the signals from those conversations in an unbiased way, and if you don't allow companies to act on them, the companies will lose revenue. And this became my pitch and motto. In fact, this is what I use for recruiting. I paint the big picture. This is what you're going to solve, right? This is a broad problem. It's a very difficult problem to solve. You want to come join me. So my first hire was a very fascinating story. So he's a young kid, and he was working for VMware, and I got to know him through one of my angel investor. And I meet him at a coffee shop, and I told him about this idea and all that. And he had some experience in the support land as an engineer. When I pitched the idea, I loved it. And then I said, "When can you join?" I said, "I'm married, I have a wife, and wife doesn't work. Uh, I can join next week." It's like, I was stunned. I was really stunned. He's actually nearby. He's in Raleigh, um, and I was really stunned. And so the first set of people they want to hire are the most crucial ones. There's a video. I wish I could show this, and there's a video on YouTube. You can watch it. It basically the video is like there's a beach, big beach, and one fat guy there is like in the beach. He's having a great time. He's drinking and everything, and then he goes and does some crazy dance in the beach, right? And at the moment, everybody looks at it and laughs at him, and then but they generally see the joy of him dancing in the beach. Then slowly, one more person joins and dances with him. Slowly, one more person joins and dances with him. Slowly, and then suddenly, you see the entire crowd is dancing in the beach. That is what startup is all about. That's absolutely startup is all about. The biggest issue you're going to get is hiring the first person. When you hire the first person and you see the first person dancing and enjoying and having a great time, you will have the second person, the third person, then it becomes a moment. So the video is called How to Start a Moment in YouTube. If you get a chance, it's a fun video to watch it. It just visually tells you that to start a moment, all you need one crazy person. That's all you need. Founders are often crazy people. They're just crazy people. We are too naive to think that we can change the world. And you have to be naive to start a company because it's not an easy journey. Absolutely not an easy journey. So this was a mission, and I pitched to him, and he joined the company. I was stunned, and I told him, "Dude, I don't have any salary to give you. I have an angel check of $25,000, and that's it. I mean, that won't even cover 1/4 of your salary in Bay Area." And he lives in Bay Area in Palo Alto. It's a very expensive place to live. He said, "Don't worry about it. I'll join. I'll take whatever salary you can give it to me." So he joined. Um, Fundraising, I thought, will be easy. And whoa, boy, I was so mistaken. When you're building something net new, which nobody has done ever before. There is no precedence for what you have done before. Half the time, not half the time, 99% of the time, you're educating your investors what you're building. They don't know what you're building and they don't understand it. We tend to think investors know everything that's going on in the space. Often, it's entrepreneur's job is to educate the investors, especially when you're creating something new. So they never understood what we are building. They're like, why not building a chatbot? Why not building a knowledge management? What is this? What is supposed to solve the problem? So it was very challenging. I had angel investment from my VMware Mafia network, but didn't have any institutional funding. So it was getting very, very stressful for me for a while because had this guy join me, he left his squishy job in VMware, joined me, and I have to pay him, and I didn't have enough salary to pay him. So I was starving. I didn't take any salary, and that was okay because I had my green card, so I didn't need to worry about that. And then I was on public healthcare because I was very worried because I lost my healthcare without a job. So I was very worried about how do I take care of my healthcare issues. So luckily there was public healthcare that he was able to enroll. I was doing Airbnb in my home. That was my only income. And so that's what kept me afloat for 2 years, first 2 years. And I had a mortgage to pay. I had a home there. There was a mortgage to pay. So it's very tough. Basically, I burned through all my VMware savings for the first 2 years. It was a really, really tough time. But slowly, as the hiring changed, and this is my first team I want to show you there. So Charles there, he's the guy from Raleigh who joined, and that's me with more hair and more young before my startup years, and that's the rest of the founding team. So most of the folks in this team were hired through AngelList. I don't know, I think the company is renamed themselves right now to something else. I don't know their current name, but there used to be a website called AngelList. And the whole idea of that AngelList is a website designed for entrepreneurs to hire other engineers who are only interested in joining a startup, not big companies. I had tremendous success there. But the number one thing about hiring, in my experience, is you're constantly selling the vision, the company, your idea, your passion to your employees. And this doesn't stop. Even on the company its scale, it doesn't stop. So that's what I was doing. Because you really have nothing. You have a few slides in the deck and an idea. You ask somebody to join a company, you don't have salary to pay. It's just purely finding like-minded, passionate people who want to make a change, who want to make an impact, and they're willing to risk everything, just like you, right? That's the kind of people AngelList was curating, which was really good. So managed to hire pretty much everyone there were hired through AngelList in the picture there. And everyone I have to sell the company the vision. It becomes somewhat easier when you have a team. When you have 2 people, 3 people in the team, they actually start talking to the people who are these are the crazy folks who are joining this company, right? And then it gets a little bit easier. So it was solely organically started building the company. The other thing is when you're hiring, and this is my fundamental rule, you're not going to hire your perfect guy. The skills required for 0 to 1, and the skills required from 1 to 10, and the skills required from 10 to 100 are completely different. They're not the same people. The first engineer who does 0 to 1 won't scale for 1 to 10. Absolutely won't scale. And 10 to 100 is a completely different ballgame. Forget it. So you have to remember that for 0 to 1, you're not looking for a perfect guy. 0 to 1 is more of a hacker. 1 to 10, you want somebody with scaled engineering practice. 10 to 100, it's all about process. It's not about software development skills at that point. It's all about following process. So 0 to 1 is like blank sheet of paper. You want somebody to hack something, get something going. And a lot of people are not very comfortable with it. I mean, even if you look at open source movement, right? It's easier when there's already a code base. You can contribute to the code base because there is a code structure. You can review it. You can contribute. When you have a blank sheet of paper, it is paralyzing for a lot of folks. They don't know what to do, where to start. And so you need a special kind of people for 0 to 1. This is not just for engineering. This is true for sales. This is true for marketing. Take any functional role. People who thrive in 1 to 10 or 10 to 100 don't thrive in 0 to 1. So you need to find those special unicorns when you're hiring. And so that's what it is. So what do we do as a company, and what is the core differentiation? I want to talk about this here. So the core idea is that turn customer interactions into intelligence. So let's say you have a customer support conversation, you're going back and forth with a customer, right? The customer says, I'm not happy with the progress, I'm running into this issue with this, I'm going to switch to your competition, blah, 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 blah. We use natural language processing to extract signals such as lack of progress, frustration, confusion, impatient, documentation gap, feature request, technical jargons that customers are using, so on and so forth. And also on the outbound side, when somebody is communicating to a customer, we also extract signals from outbound communications. Is the person being empathetic? Are they being polite? Are they making commitments to the customer they're able to follow, so on and so forth? So this is the core idea behind this. So every one of those signals that you see on the right hand side is a machine learning model classifier. Every one of them is. So frustration, there's a special machine learning model, because frustration in natural language can be expressed in, I don't know, zillion different ways. Confusion can be expressed in zillion different ways. So each and every one of that is a machine learning model. But we didn't land this on day one, just to just to give you a perspective on this. In fact, sentiment analysis or signal extraction was not even on our radar when we started the company. When we started the company, there's only three philosophies, which is support is a revenue center. Experience is going to become very, very critical for businesses going forward, and you need to help business to protect their experience. And then AI is a very big technology, and AI will play a big role in the organizations. Those are the pieces. We didn't think that needs to be translated into sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis became an accident, complete accident. Now you hear this from a lot of startups that have scaled. Their initial idea and what they do eventually are slightly different, even though they directionally they're heading the same place, but the ideas are very different. So why this became a surprise finding for us? Having worked in customer support, I was so used to dealing with unhappy, frustrated customers every day. So for me, I was thinking, what's the point of sentiment? I mean, if you're calling customer support means you're upset. So sentiment has no value for me to understand, because I was only dealing with unhappy customers day in, day out. So sometimes your subject matter expertise can come against product market fit. Often we think that if you have a subject matter expertise in one field, we think that we can find product market fit earlier. Sometimes it can create blind spots for you because you're so familiar with the subject matter expert, you're not thinking from a different vantage point. I really thought sentiment analysis is useless because every customer is upset when they call. No point in stating the obvious. Turns out the sentiment signals are much deeper than just positive sentiment and negative sentiment. If there is confusion, it may indicate product quality issues or usability issues. If there is a feature request, that's an input to product teams. If there's a production issue, that's probably an input to reliability SRE team, so on and so forth, right? So every signal class add value outside of support. But as a support person, you're only solving issue and going to the next issue. You're dropping the signals on the floor. It's usually never gets carried to the rest of the company. And this is a challenge I faced in VMware as well. So that was the aha moment. Oh, the value is actually, even though the data source is coming from support conversation, the value goes people outside of support. And this something accidentally we showed to a customer. The customer really, really liked it. And then they probed more and more into it, and then we started building a prototype on it. So to do a quick prototype, we didn't have ML expertise, deep ML expertise. Also, building machine learning models for all of this takes time. You can't build it very, very quickly. So what we did is we did labeling, manual labeling. So we got access to support data from one of our customers. Literally, we read through all the support conversations and labeled it. Okay, this text means this text means this. And then we built a UI around it. So everything that we manually label will show up in the UI like the machine learning automatically detected it. So we didn't build machine learning models straight away. We wanted to see whether there is demand and product market fit for it before we start investing R&D investments into this space. So the manual labeling process also very, very useful exercise, because when you're labeling it, we were figuring out all different flavors of sentiments coming up, all the nuances. So we were starting to build an ontology for the sentiment itself. So I still recommend for anyone who's doing anything in the AI space, and generally data scientists, they are very, they think that labeling is beneath them. I think every data science should label. You need to get a feel for the data you're working with. When you get a feel for the data you're working with, that's when you build better machine learning models. So this exercise of labeling really helped. And how did we label in the early days? So we had me and Charles was my first employee. So we had a party called Labeling Party. So we invited Charles' wife, my girlfriend back then, and we all sat together. We ordered a bunch of beer and pizza, reading it and we're labeling it. Right, that's how we built our first prototype system. So that gradually developed. I mean, initial machine learning model was not an ML classifier. We used a technology called Spacey from Stanford, and it's more of a complex. It's more like a regex, but not exactly regex. So we slowly the technology evolved. But today we do pretty advanced stuff using large language models and everything. But we didn't start there. We crawl, walk, and ran very slowly. The second thing on the right hand side you see is also we have a scoring system. So what this does is, in addition to extracting signals, we also keep a running context of what's happening. So what does a running context means? If it's a support case, maybe the sentiment started neutral and progressively getting worse, or the sentiment was really worse and then progressively getting better. So we keep a running sentiment score. We also keep a running urgency score. If it's a production issue, the urgency will be very different. If it's customer urgency going back and forth, it'll be very different. So we did a lot of those kind of stuff here to add more value in addition to what the signals were doing. Today we do a lot more stuff. Now we can do skill prediction. Like if from conversations we can identify what skills are required to solve a customer issue and route the issue to the right subject matter expert within the company automatically. Again, all of these problems I faced as a support engineer. And that's what we codified into a product. So the journey looks something like this. It's a 7+ year journey. So my feedback here is that if you're building something, have a grand vision, but absolutely crawl, walk, run. Don't jump into the deep end of the pool and start building something very advanced. It may not always work. Start with a very simple step. So we built a signal extraction engine. We built a scoring engine. We built the prediction engine. We built a recommendation engine. We have an alerting engine, summarization engine, so on and so forth. Along the way, all this technology being built, we also built workflows around it, strong UI workflows around it, right? All of this is great, Krishna. So what? What's the big deal? We built some cool technology. What is the big deal, right? For me, the measure of this technology is only the impact that it makes. And that's where we are super, super excited. I want to share that today we are extremely proud some of the world's best technology companies are using our product. Companies like BMC, Snowflake, Databricks, Salesforce, lot of tech companies use our product today. In fact, Red Hat used to be our customer. Unfortunately, they've stopped using our product only recently, but a lot of open source companies also use our product. Why? For open source companies, Elastic is also is a customer. Elastic is one of the open source companies. But anyway, for these companies, support is a very crucial part of the revenue source, right? It's an open source product. Support is where the monetization happens. So they want to make sure they're keeping their customers really, really happy and understanding the emotions of the customer, doing proactive support, routing the issues to the right subject matter expert, all the stuff that we do. For them, it's really we're treating them as a support as a revenue center, not a cost center. So our technology became very foundational. So for many of these companies, we are deployed for many, many years in advance. Many years they're using our product. So one thing I want to say is also bootstrapping problem. So when you want to build this technology, right, you need data. All these companies support it as proprietary data. So how will I train my machine learning model if I don't have any customers? How do I get my first customer without any training data set? to train a machine learning model. So that's where I leveraged on actually Bugzilla database for Red Hat, because that was a completely available open. So I wrote a small Python script to go and crawl through Bugzilla database and dump all the data into my system. That became my training data set. In fact, my demo environment in the early days of the company was actually all Bugzilla databases from Red Hat. And that's what we used. Because, I mean, you'll be amazed by the number of sentiments you see in open source databases, not just sentiments, profanity, kind of crazy stuff. So there was a really, really good training data set for our machine learning model for signal extraction. But a lot of companies, when they start, data becomes a challenge for you. So you have to get very creative about getting access to the data. Second thing is, in the early days, first customer we closed was Cloudera. They're not in the logo list because Cloudera as a business is not doing well. They churned. They're actually coming back as a customer now. But Cloudera database also is very, very interesting for us. So the way we work with them is we did design partnership initially. We said, hey, we'll give the software away for free for 6 months in exchange for getting access to your data, right? So that's how we got access to some prime data set. So my overall point here is that to start anything from 0 to 1, whether it's hiring, whether it's building a product that compelling product the customer needs, there's a lot of experimentation that goes, really a lot of experimentation that goes. And so don't build the whole thing, build it in pieces, bits and pieces, and constantly experiment. And that's what we did. The product has evolved continuously, still evolving. There is this notion that product market fit is a one and done thing, and it's not. Product market fit is a continuous thing. What was product market fit a year ago may not be a product market fit today, because the market has evolved. We're not selling to a static market. The market is constantly evolving. So which means your product also needs to constantly evolve. And that is the evolution we're still going through. Because 2 years ago, with the introduction of ChatGPT and Gen AI and all that, AI has become forefront right now. Our product also has evolved quite a bit to take advantage of some of those generative AI functionality. So last, I want to show a little bit of video clip. It may sound a little bit more promotional video clip, but I want to show it for one reason. So today, I'll just give you an update on the business, right? So we really struggled to raise our first round of financing 2 years. Today, we have raised close to $66 million in funding. That's a lot of money, for sure. During our fundraising, the common criticism we got in Silicon Valley is Salesforce will crush you. Salesforce will absolutely crush you. They have access to all the data, customer support data, and everything. They're going to do it. So in my Series B pitch, my opening second slide was Salesforce is a customer, any questions? And then we got funded $50 million in that round. So I want to show you a video from Salesforce on and how this works. I don't know if the audio will come through. We'll see. Audio is not coming through. It's fine. This is basically a testimonial video from Salesforce and how they're using our technology for their own customer support. So today, Salesforce any customer support conversation that are coming into Salesforce is processed by us right now. We're processing like 1.5 million tickets a year, roughly, and they're pretty much depend on us right now. And they were considered to be one of our prime competitors before. And it's such a very interesting that sometimes companies that you think you're going to compete with or will end up becoming some of your best customers if you build something nice. So anyway, so that's kind of the slide. The audio is not coming up, but you can look it up in YouTube. That's kind of my pitch on how we achieved product market fit, some of the hiring things we did, a lot of fun journey. I'll open the floor for any questions at this point.
So if you had to talk to a little version of you now, how would you tell them? What would you tell them to get started to kind of reach where you are now?
What will I get?
Well, like if someone wanted to pretty much follow your path, what would you you said you grew up on the magazines and you had the
Right.
Linux distribution. What would you tell them now to get started?
So I think my biggest advice for any entrepreneurs or who wants to start something is often we make the mistake of, oh, there's a huge market opportunity. Let's go build a company because there's a huge market opportunity. To me, that's a wrong way of looking at things. Um, I've seen entrepreneurs who are trying to chase a market. They don't have the passion to survive the grueling journey of being an entrepreneur and they give up eventually. The entrepreneurs who succeed are the ones who are so passionate about the space that they're willing to put up with any of the grueling journey you're going to go through. So pick something you're really, really passionate about. Like when I was in the formation period of starting my company, lots of ideas came into my head. I wanted to start an infrastructure company, a mobile company, and lots of different ideas. A lot of them excited me for a week and then it fizzled out. Support issues somehow excited me more. Every time I think, even now, I mean, it's been so many years, I wake up very excited about the space. And that's absolutely crucial. If you don't wake up getting excited about your problem every day, you're working on the wrong problem. So again, this thing, right? Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. That's also true, but also the falling in love with the problem is so important for starting a company. Market size and everything can be created. Entrepreneur's job is to create a market that did not exist before. So if you find an element of truth in your thinking, a point of view in your thinking, a unique point of view, you can create a massive market because you'll be surprised to see millions of other people think like you. We think we are in isolation and then you'll find your community. Yeah.
This kind of relates to the question that you just answered, but I thought your concept of entrepreneur market fit
Right.
was really, it was great. I'm wondering how I guess this is sort of different for every entrepreneur, but all the time you have to make endless decisions, right? So how do you make resource-based decisions in terms of when you're going to deploy capital to push in a certain direction? For me, it's really it's sense-based and it's a lot of research,
Right.
and it takes me time. But I was just wondering how you personally do it, having
Yeah.
gotten to 6 million or 7 million of funding or whatever.
Yeah, great question. I think one thing I would say is that generally in the software industry space, computing space, my take is logic is overrated and intuition is underrated. Even some of the best coders in the world, they're not making decisions by logic. They go with a lot of intuition and gut feeling. And that's very, very, very true for entrepreneurs too, because when you are in the forefront of building something new, by definition, you don't have a lot of data. So you cannot make a database decision. You can't make logic-based decision. You have to go with your gut instincts, says. And some of the best entrepreneurs in the world they're just really good in following their gut. When you're an individual contributor, which I was for many, many years, when you're working for a large company, you're trained to suppress your gut because you're following somebody's marching orders. So you're not following what you feel is the right thing to do. So you have to do that unlearning when you're starting your own company. Like I heavily started focusing on what I feel, viscerally what I feel in my body. This is even true in recruiting decisions. Every day when you're meeting someone, I have to make quick judgment within 30 minutes or sometimes in 5 minutes of my meeting, whether I want to spend more time in this meeting or should I go to the next meeting? Whether should I hire this person or not hire this person? Whether I need to partner with this company or not? Whether I should fundraise now or should later? All of these are gut decisions. So paying attention to your body, your visual feeling, how you feel is super important. It sounds kind of little, I don't know, not logical, but that's so important.
Yeah, thanks. Is there any mistake that you made along the way that really stands out to you in terms of I shouldn't have spent those $500,000 or something like that?
A lot, more than $500,000, probably in the millions of dollars. We became capital inefficient right after our $50 million fundraising. We burned through a lot of capital in a relatively short span of time. In hindsight, I would not have done that. I mean, this is something I knew, that when you raise capital, you always think, oh, I want to still be frugal. Because in the early stage, you're extremely frugal. When you don't have money, you're extremely frugal. When cash hits the bank, you find numerous ways to spend it, and you think you're spending for good reasons, but you realize they're not necessarily for good reasons. So I think even if you have capital in the bank, almost think like you're running this company from your own bank balance, and that discipline can really help in the long way.
I was curious, as a leader, how did you keep your team so bought in with that mobility and flexibility? Like, I want to say keep your team agile, but I don't mean the software methodology, but
Right.
because you didn't plan on using large language models to process this stuff in the beginning.
Right.
But obviously you had enough buy-in from your team to say like, oh, this is it. Let's go this way.
This top down. It was very top down, because if you let it to engineer by themselves, they want to work on the most complex problem. They want to use the latest and cutting edge technology, because that's what whets their appetite. Was top down initiative saying, I want results. I want something in the UI right now. Right? Don't worry about how it gets done. Let's put it in front of customers, see there's value, then you start building it. So that eventually became the culture of the company. But a lot of it is initially I was very, very UI driven, like working backwards. Let's build the UI and functionality and everything. How the backend works doesn't matter. In fact, initially we didn't even have a backend API. Everything was coming from a local database using just JavaScript. There was not even a backend API, because it's the fastest way to iterate. And that's how we show the prototype first. So yeah, it needs to come top down. That's what if you just let it to engineers, there's no end to, they'll focus on perfection, and perfection doesn't help in this case.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.